Chapter 19. Jeremy sits on the couch in his living room, his head in the arms and breast of Erin. She consoles him, though she has not yet been able to figure out what his fears are truly about. As Jeremy leans quietly into Erin, she runs her fingers through his unkempt, brown hair gently, and lays her cheek against the top of his head in comfort. They sit in silence for quite some time. Hours pass before Jeremy finally sits up slowly and releases himself from her embrace, and places the scrap of paper he had been gripping tightly back into Erin's hands. "What is this?" she asks, as she begins to look at the paper once again. Jeremy places his face into his hands and his elbows on his knees to support the weight of his head as he leans forward on the couch. "Jeremy, what does this mean?" Erin continues as she places her hand on his shoulder and leans in toward him. After he does not answer right away, she slowly shakes his shoulder. She is obviously worried about what is going on with him, but is afraid to push Jeremy into an explanation. She has seen his reactions in the past when pressed too hard. "Jeremy?" she asks once more, in the softest voice she can muster up. If this doesn't work, she plans on dropping the subject altogether for the time being. However, Jeremy raises his head from his palms and stares at the powered-off television screen across the short, dark wooden coffee table from them. "That's the proof there really is a connection between myself and all of their deaths," Jeremy finally answers out of the silence. "It's the proof that I'm the reason Wilt is dead, that Mr. Sampson is dead, that..." He halts mid-sentence, and tears once again begin to well up in his eyes. Jeremy will not, however, allow these tears to fall from beyond his lashes. Breathing deeply, he inhales them back in and continues on. "That I'm the reason AJ is dead." He finishes with pain grasping at his vocal cords, with each word forced out. Shocked, Erin begins to really look at the paper. Feverishly, she searches the paper up and down, but cannot understand how this small piece of paper holds evidence so convincing that Jeremy now believes himself responsible for their friends' deaths. She sees only dates and names listed together, but cannot in the least fathom what it all truly means in the mind of Jeremy. How does this make you responsible for anyone's death? I don't understand," Erin asks, shaking in shock, and not removing her eyes from the writing on the small paper in her hands. Jeremy snatches the paper viciously from Erin's hands, much to her surprise, and jabs his index finger into the paper, pointing at the words with vigor. "The dreams," he says, his finger running across each of the dates, seemingly expecting Erin to somehow understand. "What dreams?" Erin asks, almost shouting at him now. She is taken aback by her own action and pulls away a little. Astonishing herself with these actions, she wishes to run away in shame, but is confused and wants answers. "What are the dreams you keep talking about?" Jeremy finally realizes that his message just isn't getting through to Erin, so he grabs her hand and stands up. Without saying a word, he begins quickly toward the stairs leading to the second floor of the house. After the third or fourth step upward, Erin pulls back a little in apprehension. "Where are we going?" she asks as fearful tears well up in her wide eyes. Jeremy, however, doesn't answer. He just keeps on hauling her along. Charging so quickly up the stairs, Jeremy ends up nearly dragging Erin to the floor, as she could barely keep pace with him. "Jeremy!" she calls out again, but again there is no response. Jeremy drags her across the hall to the bathroom near the bedroom. Flipping on the light switch hastily, Jeremy stops, bringing Erin to a sudden stop with him. They stand there, facing their reflections in the mirror. Jeremy lays hateful eye on the mirror as Erin just stands there silently and waits for something to happen. Not to a total surprise to her, nothing does happen as they eagerly glare into the mirror. Jeremy just continues to stand there next to her, staring at his own reflection for a handful of moments. It takes quite a few minutes before he drops his glare from the mirror and turns his head slightly in Aaron's direction. Deeply inhaling, Jeremy opens his mouth and begins to speak. Here. Jeremy finally breaks his silence. Here's where it happens. Aaron so wishes to ask more questions, as she has many flying around her mind right now. But which ones? What are the correct questions for her to ask? She doesn't know, so she stays silent and hopes that soon Jeremy will come to answer her unasked questions on his own. The dreams, he begins again. They happen the same time as the murders. He goes on as he steps forward and he places his hand on the counter while staring into the eyes of his reflection. Without taking his eyes off the surface of the mirror, he turns his focus to the reflection of Aaron, who hasn't moved a single bit since they stopped just inside the bathroom doorway. The dreams take place in here. He returns his gaze back to the eyes of his own reflection, with him. His face switches to a more angry, disgusted expression. Standing still for a moment, staring at his reflection, he continues on in explanation. He talks to me, he reveals, followed by a heavy gulping in his throat. And he shows me. He steps away from the counter without finishing the sentence and walks heavy-footed over to Aaron. Placing his arms around her, he clutches her tightly. And when I see him, people die, he announces before falling back into utter silence. Aaron's eyes close tightly as she wraps her arms tightly around Jeremy as well. As they hold each other there, alone, heart to heart, a single tear wells up in her left eye, and she screams out, "Stop it!" As Jeremy's eyes open wide. "You cannot blame yourself for this," she says as she pushes him away far enough to look him in the eyes. She clasps him by the face and focuses their eyes deeply into one another. Jeremy places his fingers on her lips. Taking a step back away from her, he turns to break eye contact. "Aaron, I know it doesn't sound real, but it's happened every time so far," Jeremy says softly. "I don't want it to be true either, but it is." Aaron grabs him by the hands and holds him tightly. She looks at him sweetly. "I refuse to believe that you have anything to do with this," she responds. "I know you'd never hurt anyone." "I didn't say it was me," Jeremy states. "It's the dreams. My dreams are causing their deaths," he says, lowering his head in shame. "That's ridiculous!" Aaron shouts and turns to walk away, full of emotion. After only taking a few steps, she turns back to Jeremy, staring deeply into his own reflection again. She felt a loneliness emanating from him. Easily seeing that he's hurting, she can't bear to leave him alone. Aaron walks up and hugs him tightly from behind. Tightly gripping the top of Jeremy's chest, she rests her head on the back of his neck and sighs. "Damn it," she lets out. "If you really believe this, we will have to do whatever we can to prove you wrong," she continues as Jeremy turns around to look her in the face. "How can we do that?" he challenges. "Easy," Aaron smiles at him. "We'll just have to keep you awake and prove to you that you have absolutely nothing to do with this." As she reaches up and places her hand tenderly on his cheek, "Whoever is really responsible for this will eventually slip up, and you and everyone else will see that you have nothing to do with this." She clutches his shirt and pulls him in close. Draping her arms around his neck, she kisses him very firmly. She pulls her face away from his, smiles largely, gives him a little wink. "We just have to keep you awake." Thank you for listening. If you're enjoying the story and how it's going, please subscribe so you can get every chapter as it comes through. Discuss in the comments, plot threads, and where you think the story's going. Share with anybody you think might find it interesting. Until then, I'll see you next video.